So welcome to the Melody Tools Workshop. Today we are going to dive into tools that you can use to write better melodies and write better songs. So when we talk about tools, we're not talking about actual, like I had some people asking me, like, are we talking about software? Are we talking about instruments? Are we talking about that thing? The tools that we're talking about are actually technical tools and techniques that you can use to think about as you are developing your songs. So what we're going to cover today is, what is melody? Why is melody important? We're also going to talk about melody knobs to turn. And when I talk about knobs, that means like things that you can adjust in your melodies. We're going to talk a lot about melodic phrases. We're going to talk about how you can learn to spot melodic phrases and melodic motif. And then also talk a little bit about how lyrics and melodies combine. And then also, like I said, some open discussion. So glad that you guys can make it here today. So wanted to start off with, where do melody ideas come from? And obviously this is not an exhaustive list. You know, there's a million ways that melodies can pop up, but I was just thinking, you know, melodies can come from the rhythm of a title. A lot of times a title can give you a rhythmic motif. Rhythm of lyrics and the meter of the lyrics can give you melodic ideas. There's also notes in your chords. A lot of us are probably writing, you know, we're doing the hum and strum method where you're singing notes that are in the chord. You can also find melodies within notes within your scale or the mode that you're writing in. Also, the rhythm of songs that you like. You know, you can use the rhythm of melodies and change the pitches. So that's something that if you find yourself writing kind of the same type of melody a lot, take just the rhythmic aspect of a song you like, and then make the pitches completely different. And you can also take little snippets of melodies and rearrange and edit them to make them into something new that's not recognizable. Also, sometimes melodies come from riffs or patterns that you play on your instrument. I think I've done this a lot where I start playing on the piano and you know, I do some sort of pattern and I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of like a vocal melody, or that could be a cool, you know, vocal melody. Sometimes melodies just pop out of thin air. They just pop into our head, that's the best case scenario, right? That's where the heavens open up and like inspiration strikes and everything falls into place. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. You can also find melody ideas in public domain songs, songs that have, their copyright has expired, or also in songs like hymns. And also just feed your mind more melodies and listen intently to what melodies are doing. I think there's a difference between passive and active listening. And I think when it comes to developing your melodic ear, I think active listening, where you're actually paying attention to what is happening, where does the melody repeat? You know, what are some of the rhythms that are happening? That helps to feed your mind. So when it comes time to write, you start to do those things, what I would say, by accident. So you pay attention on purpose to do it by accident. So one of the quotes that I always remember as I'm writing is, a great melody can save a mediocre lyric, but great lyrics will not save a weak melody. And I think that I've taken that to heart, and the best songs that I myself have written have really had a stronger melody. So that's what I want you guys to think about is, you know, I hear a lot of the songs that you guys write, and lyrically they're very good, but I think melodically it doesn't carry the lyric the way that it should. So I think melody is something important to study and help you become a better songwriter. I wrote down a list of songwriters that I have heard that write melody first. Ryan Tedder, Diane Warren, Louis Bell, who's a pop and hip hop producer, DJ Swivel, who works with Beyonce, Gordon Lightfoot. In the Gordon Lightfoot documentary, he talked about coming up with chords and then a melody before he writes lyrics. Max Martin, who's written more top 100 songs than Almost anybody. Lennon and McCartney are the only people that have more hits than Max Martin at this point. But he starts a lot with melody first. Katy Perry, Robin, Charlie Puth, her. I'm sure there's many, many more. Um, and Adam in the chat says Paul McCartney and Billy Joel. It's funny that you say Billy Joel, Adam, because we wanted to hear from him next. So let's have some open discussion here. And this is a good time for you to take down notes of what your fellow songwriters think about melody, because it can kind of be a checklist for you on what makes a good melody. So just open question for you guys. What are the qualities that you feel makes a great melody? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just what you naturally think. So if you'd like to raise your hand or put it in the chat, would love to hear your thoughts for sure. Adam, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I'm on my phone. Sorry, I'm having all kinds of issues. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All the above. You can just hear me. Oh. um, I I really like your short list there, Chad. It's really hard to put everything into one list, but you did say some real gems. Rhythm. You know my spiel. The rhythm of the melody is if it's infectious, pitches can be flexible. You can almost always find something interesting if the rhythm stands on its own.
Absolutely.
That's where it begins and ends with me.
Yeah, and that's the thing we're going to talk about is melody is really built up of rhythm and pitch. And rhythm is actually more important, as Adam said, than the pitches actually are, because the rhythm is what carries that pitch, and lyrically the way that you set your rhythm has more impact than the notes that you're actually singing. In the chat, Camden says dramatic emphasis, so kind of having melodic things happening to get points across. Leslie says it goes to surprising places. Steven says memorable. Drew says singable range. That's really important. Sometimes people say, well, I'm not a very good singer, I can't write very good songs. And it's like, actually, people can oversing songs. So just having an average voice can actually help you write songs that more people can connect with. So don't feel like you need to be Celine Dion to write, good songs. And shout out to our Canadian friends with Celine. Emily says contour. If it were written out in sheet music, it would have a really interesting shape. Absolutely. John Paul says easy to sing along to, memorable and rhythmical. Veronica says simple but fun. It's being repeated in the head. Fluidity. And Rez, did you have your hand raised as well?
Yeah, I just raised my hand and then I wrote fluidity.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Stu says repetition and variation, simple versus soaring, range moving from one scale to another. Ra says strong emotion. So we're going to talk about the tools that you have at your disposal to do all of those things. Susan says repetition with a hook. I think that's the thing that, as we write songs, is to remember that we actually should write songs that kind of help our listener remember them. I don't remember who said it, but some famous songwriter said that it's our job to have the song teach itself to our listener. And I thought that was a really cool way to think about it, is it has to be so memorable that once, by the time you hear the end of the song, you're singing along to that chorus, or you remember it to where you want to listen to it again. So as we think about how songs are actually constructed, there's really 4 things that build up one song. And obviously there's different combinations. Depending on genre, these things can take more importance than the other. So the 4 things are groove, harmony, melody, and lyrics. So your foundation is really based in the rhythm or the groove of the song. And when we say groove, that doesn't necessarily mean like drums and bass, like disco music or anything. It's just kind of, that could be strumming pattern. It could be the way that you're playing the piano, or kind of the rhythm of the accompaniment. And then the harmony is actually the chords. The melody is the vocal melody. And then obviously the vocal melody supports the lyrics. In different genres, these all take different importance, but I would say that melody is the thing that can tie it all together. And melody is really what makes your song able to be changed to different genres. Because you've heard some songs that people do as a pop song, they do it as a country song, they do it as more of a, maybe like a singer-songwriter version. That usually comes down to a song with a great melody. So melody, as we said, is made up of pitch and rhythm, and we're talking about the vocal rhythm and pitch of the song. So instruments, while they can play melodies, this workshop we're really focused on talking about the vocal melody. So the quality of your melody, one way to think about this is that the quality of your melody to your lyrics is kind of like the quality of an actor that's delivering lines. If you have a really good actor, they can deliver a line and you believe it, right? But if you have an actor that is not so great, they could say the exact same line as a great actor, but you don't believe the less, let's call it less experienced actor. It's the same with your lyrics and your melody. If your melody is not as strong as it could be, that can affect the believability of your lyrics. And I think we would all agree that songs that we love and songs that connect with people are songs that have a high level of believability, right? And I heard someone the other day say that when you're trying to write hit songs, you are trying to write songs that connect with millions of people. And I think the only way that you're going to connect with millions of people is if you have very strong melody, and then of course strong lyrics as well. Susan says she feels like the melody is the carrier of emotion. Absolutely. So your lyric, so think about it this way: your melody and your chords carry the emotional piece of your song, and your lyrics really carry the logical piece of your song, because you feel music, but you think about lyrics. And that's one way that I kind of think about it in my head as well. So lyrics to melody, when you think about how lyrics line up, a syllable in a lyric will usually match notes, or if you're doing a melisma, it would be a few notes. Words are notes or notes. A lyrical line usually equates to a melodic phrase or a melodic motif. And then a lyrical section is usually a combination or a section of patterns of melodic phrases. A melodic motif, to kind of define that then, it's the small identifiable pattern of rhythm and pitch. So it's something that you identify and you hear it repeated within the melody. So it's kind of like a small little theme or a small little nugget that gets built on within the melodic evolution of the song. So my friend Tony at Songwriter Chop Shop, he's based in Ireland, but he has a great little 60-second video, and he's got a lot of other videos that you should check out as well. But this has some vocal melody sauce information that I thought went really well with what we're. And I think what's great about looking at motif or the motivic development in a song is the fact that songs that seem more complicated actually have very simple motifs that are built on and repeated to create the body of the work. So as you analyze songs, I would like you to start listening for melodic phrases to see where the lines are and how they line up to the lyric. And listening to where the melodic phrases and where the motifs are can start to give you a sense of how are these patterns made. And many times you will find that the lines that rhyme will have the same melody. So again, the lines that rhyme in a lot of songs will actually have the same melody. So lyrically, if you just recited the lyrics, they would have the same meter and they would end with the same rhyme. So it's like it's kind of a lyrical rhythmic motif that sort of exposes itself in the melody as well. So one song that does this is a song by James Taylor that many of you know, great song called Fire and Rain. So listen to just the melody and see how this repeats. So you'll find that this is a let's just listen to the melody on piano, and I'll kind of use my cursor to follow along on the lyrics if you're not familiar with the song. But you'll see that the melody has a definite pattern that matches the rhyme scheme. So the motif, if you added letters to the motif, would line up with the letters of your rhyme scheme as well. And I think this is something that, like, it's something that I need to get better at in my own writing, because sometimes I'm not very good at doing this, but I think it does subconsciously and structurally make for a better song. So let's listen to Fire and Rain. So as you could see, there's basically a 6-line verse here. So you have the just yesterday morning rhymes and has the same melodic motif as I walked out this morning. They let me know you were gone has the same motif melodically, and it rhymes, gone and song. And then you also have the I just can't remember who to send it to, which rhymes with this line as well and has a very similar melody pattern as well. So it's basically A, B, C for this verse. And that's the same rhyme scheme and melodic scheme. And let's listen to the actual lyrics now and see if you can spot where the lines that rhyme sound the same melodically. See that pattern? It's that ABC for both. And I think this is a song that I always go back to when I sort of kind of need to realign myself with like melodic motif thinking, because it's such a great example of how these little phrases build into a section that just works. And the verse itself has a hook because you remember that melody and you remember that hook as well. Another song that does the same thing is a song that was written by Max Martin and some other writers for Ariana Grande called Into You. And on the left over here, I've marked the letters of what I hear as the melodic motif. So you can see it's A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. And then over here, the rhyme scheme does basically the same thing. It's A, B, A, B. Here's a non-rhyming line and a non-rhyming line, but it's still that pattern of line, rhyme. And then when it gets to more of the pre-chorus here, it contrasts both of these, but they still match each other. So it's interesting when you hear it. So pay attention to how these lines and how the melody repeats, and try to listen in your mind as these little line by line melodic motifs instead of hearing it as a full song, because this is another example of it sounds more complicated than it is, but it's very, very effective. So this is Into You. Second part of the chorus just kind of repeated the same pattern, but do you see how the melody lines are actually very simple? Lyrically, it's pretty simple as well. That kind of fits along with the genre, but I think it's interesting that it uses the same melodic motif as the rhyme scheme, which is something that this song has in common with James Taylor, Fire and Rain, which I know a lot of people would not think of these two songs together, but it just shows that a lot of craft and a lot of structural things are not genre specific. They're tools that you can use within multiple genres. So lyrics and melody work together in a way that is very important. So Ross says, but in this case, for example, isn't hard for the listener to identify which is the chorus. For that song, I think it has a verse, a pre-chorus, and a chorus. I think the chorus is the section that has the hook or the title in it for sure. So lyrically and melodically, lyrics, the way that we speak with accented and unaccented syllables. And melodies have notes that are strong beats and notes that are on weaker beats. So the way that you set your lyric onto your melody makes a difference. So your lyric can sound less believable if you put an unstressed or unaccented syllable on a strong beat, or you put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, right? It just sounds weird. And Katy Perry has a song called Unconditionally, and the lyrics are beautiful, but the way they said it drives me nuts. And Emily says it bugs her to death as well. But listen to, this is like, and Katy Perry, actually, Katy Perry, this is kind of like her thing. It's probably done on purpose in this case, but it still drives me nuts. And I don't think we as, Susan says, can't stand her anyway. But just listen to how this song could have been so much better. And I think this is a good song to listen to really train your ear to spot these things, because this is a problem that I hear in my own songs too sometimes, unfortunately, because sometimes, you just can't see the forest for the trees. But this is Unconditionally, and listen how it's set and see what you think. I don't know, what do you guys think? I think that it's so distracting that I don't pay attention to what she's saying, because the phrasing is weird, not only in the chorus, but some of the other parts just drive me crazy. Catrice says she likes it, and obviously a lot of people do. It's a huge song. Like, it's just Terry says it sounds like the song is working against itself. Jay, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Chad. So when I first hear Unconditional, like the first usage, and then hear the others, it feels disconcerted to me, like someone trying to use a word and not knowing the proper term, and then sticking a ness at the end because they don't know the proper word. Almost like she didn't have a word for it, so she just forced a word in there, and it's like, well, that fits. I'm just gonna use that same word and then run with it.
Yeah, honestly, I think this is a song where they probably wrote the melody first, but they didn't really get the lyric to fit in a natural speech pattern. So I think for a lot of us, it sticks out. For some people, it doesn't sound off, but for me, it just sounds weird, because that's not how we pronounce unconditionally, because it's unconditionally is the way that she's singing it, which is interesting. So the point is not to pick on Katy Perry. She does have a lot of songs that actually are very good. And they may have done it on purpose as an artistic thing. Like Adam said, a lot of her songs do it. So it might be just a way to sort of buck the system. For most of us, though, I think that if you're like a singer-songwriter, if you go and play in a coffee shop and you are singing goofy things that the way that people don't talk, I think you would lose your audience, because it's so easy to lose them anyway that they would tune out, just because it sounds more amateur. Like Jay said, to him it sounds like they forced a lyric, and that's basically what I think that by doing this, that's what it sounds like. So hit song tendencies. When you think about hit songs and the melodic motif, usually your verse 1 is your first chance to establish any sort of motif with your listener. So verse 1 is where you really set the stage of what this song could be and how you play with expectations. I think it was Leslie that said she liked unexpected things in melody. And one of the ways that you do that is you have to set a pattern and then break it. So your first verse is really your first opportunity to set that pattern. Your chorus then introduces a new contrasting melody to the verse. So this is where you do something different. So if you have a lot of short notes in your verse and maybe there's, maybe it's more offbeat type of a pattern, maybe in your chorus, you're more on beat with longer notes. Verse 2 then, and again, this is a tendency, like there's no rules, but a lot of times your listeners are used to hearing certain things. Usually your verse 2 will have the same melody as verse 1 with just a few slight note variations. So usually you don't want to change your melody too much in your second verse. The chorus melodically is usually the same as the other chorus. I'm not a believer that you should change your chorus melodically or lyrically, because if you have to change your chorus, that means your verses aren't setting it up correctly, in my mind. Bridge then is a melody that contrasts with everything. So it's something completely different. It gives us something new. And then if your song has a pre-chorus, that will usually contrast to the verse and the choruses as well. So it gives us somewhere new. And the pre-chorus usually acts kind of as a connector between your verse and your chorus. So what are the things that you can control within melodies and when you're writing melodies? So the things that you can write down as the tools that you can play with from a melody tool standpoint is you can decide how many phrases you have in a section. So you can control the number of phrases. You can control the length of the phrases, meaning are those phrases happening in one measure? Is a phrase happening in two measures? Is it a 4-bar phrase? How long is the phrase itself? Also, the rhythm of the phrases. That's the rhythm of the notes and also the rhythm of the rests. And it's also the length of your notes as well. So that is a knob that you can turn. Another knob that you can turn is pitch range. So a lot of times you'll hear songs start with the verse as being the floor. So usually the verse is the lowest part of the song. Pre-chorus might go up a little bit, and then your chorus is a little bit higher, and then it drops back down to the verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and then your bridge many times can either go higher than your chorus or it could go lower, more into a verse range as well. But that's what creates tension and release within your song. You hear people talking about the energy or building up tension and then releasing it. You can do that very effectively with pitch range by making the pitch start low in the verse, go a little bit higher, go back down, and then build up again, and then sort of go out the back of the song with the chorus repeating. Another very powerful tool that you have in your toolbox is melodic shape, which is, melodically, melodies do shapes. And someone mentioned earlier in the chat, if you look at sheet music, you can actually see melodic shapes on the paper, but you can also hear it in your mind as well. So we'll talk more about melodic shape in a minute. Also, something that's really powerful is where the phrase starts in relationship to the downbeat. So the downbeat is your 1 of the measure, no matter what time signature you're in. If you're in 4/4, if you're in 6/8, if you're in 3/4, the downbeat is the 1. And by changing where your melody starts in relationship to that, you can create contrast, but you can also create prosody with what you're saying within your song as well. So an example of this is the song How Will I Know that Whitney Houston sang. it alternates where the phrases or the melody starts. So the verses start with a pickup before the downbeat. The pre-chorus starts on the downbeat, and the chorus itself starts after the downbeat, and it creates an interesting development in the song, but it also kind of relays the emotion of it as well. So it starts off with, "There's a boy I know, he's the one I dream of. Looks into my eyes and takes me to the clouds above. Ooh, I lose control. I can't seem to get enough. When I wake from dreaming, and tell me, is it really love?" Now it's on the downbeat. "Ooh, how will I know? How will I know? How will I know? How will I know? How will I know if he really loves me? I say a prayer with every heartbeat. I fall in love whenever we meet. I'm asking you 'cause you know about these things." So if you see, it changes each section, and that's something that you can do when you are writing your songs as well, is pay attention to where the phrase is starting, because it can create different contrast, but it can also create prosody as well. And then thank you, Ra. Thank you very much. Repetition is also something that you have in your toolbox too. You know, sometimes you don't always have to be coming up with something new. It's okay to repeat certain things because it helps the listener remember your song. So one of the pro tips for all of these tools is vary as many of these as possible from section to section to create contrast and to keep your listener interested in the song. And the melodic shapes that we talked about, or that I mentioned in the list of tools, is, and these are things to kind of maybe keep on your desk or just remember to think about as you're writing melodically. These are things that you can just try and see what works. So the first one is a static or flat melody. So that's singing on, you know, basically one note, maybe within just a couple note range there. You also have a rising or ascending melody where the melody goes up. You have a falling or descending melody. Your melody can arc up and it can arc down. And then you can also have a zigzag melody where it goes kind of up and down as well. So as you think about prosody, and prosody, as we know from other workshops, is the marriage or the relationship of your lyrical content to the structural and musical content of your song. So if you had a song where someone was really bored and, you know, just life was not really going anywhere, what shape would you sort of use melodically to sort of get that point across? And you can put it in the chat or raise your hand as well. Ross says arc down. Catrice says static. Emily, bored or boring. Yep. So you could use, I mean, obviously you can use any, but the first thing, if someone's bored and things aren't changing very much, static is probably one that you could use. I think if you were feeling sad or really depressed, you could arc down, or you could use the falling. What if you had someone who was going through like a lot of anxiety, or like the song was very anxious, or like just kind of unsettled? What type of melody? Yep. So zigzag. So one of the things that Pat Pattison says, the most important question you can ask is, what emotion am I feeling in this section? And not what you're feeling while you're writing it, but what are you feeling in the song? And that's how you make your melodic, that's how you make your structural decisions and musical decisions based on how are you feeling. And Berklee College of Music, I have a certificate in professional songwriting from them, but they have some great YouTube videos. They have great online courses. But this is a great example of kind of what I'm talking about here, where you're using different shapes and different melodies to get the words or to get your emotion across. I thought that was a really great demonstration. And if you do have an opportunity to take any of the Berklee online courses, highly recommend it. So what I loved about what Scarlett was saying was she's basically saying, you know what shapes you have at your disposal and you know the tools that you have. So go literally line by line and see what sounds best for each line. I think it's something that I myself could do a lot more of, and I think some of my songs would benefit from it by thinking about how is this line coming across and how am I creating that melody. And the way that she explains it, it just makes it sound so simple and fun. So I love it. So one of the other things that I want you all to leave with today is thinking differently about how you listen to songs. So knowing the different shapes and knowing all of the different tools, you know, the number of lines, the number of phrases, the length of the phrases, the rhythms, where the phrase is starting, take some songs that you love and that really connect with you and listen with a different ear and try to analyze what's happening melodically in those and look at it through the lens of each one of the tools that we talked about, because that will help you start hearing things. And when you start to hear things in a different way, you start to write things in a different way. So it's a great tool. So what I thought we would do is listen to some songs today and see if there's things that you can pick out, just listening to some of the melodies and paying attention to the melodies. And some of these songs have lyrics, some of them don't, because and when I say lyrics, I mean on the screen, because I want you paying attention more to the melody more so than the lyrics for today. So listen to this song by 5 Seconds of Summer. It's a song called Wildflower, and it has such a cool melody that's in some kind of mode. I think it might be like mixolydian, or they might be modulating a little bit to give it just this really cool melodic feel. But see if you can spot motifs and shapes within this song, and then we'll talk about it. Some folks are saying, make sure the video stops here. There we go. Ron says he loves 5 Seconds of Summer. You wrote supper. That's awesome, Ron. Emily said it's in the mixolydian mode. Yeah, it's definitely a cool mode. We're going to talk about modes in the next workshop on August 27th. Ron said he notices rises at the end of a lot of phrases. Camden says, so is it a static and ends with an escalation? Are you talking about the wild flower? I think it does a little scoop and then goes down at the end of that. Ron said he thinks he hears a lot of third intervals. Susan likes the tension that comes on the word fatal. I think for me, this is just an example of great contrast between the different sections. Like every section has kind of its thing. You know, in the verse, the melody is a little bit more flowing, and then there's other sections where it's more of a static kind of melody that's happening, and it keeps you interested the whole time that you're listening. And I think if you actually broke down line by line what's happening, there's really only probably 4 or 5 motifs throughout the whole entire song that they just put in different orders and change the sections around to make them fit into the song. But I just love the way that this song is ultra melodic, and I love it. Whoops. So next we're going to listen to a song that has been hugely popular. It's been, you know, one of the longest charting songs in history. It's a song called Levitating that Dua Lipa performs. It was written by Sarah Hudson, Jason Evigan, Dua Lipa, Coffee, I think I'm probably going to forget some of the other songwriters too, but listen that each section starts in a different place relative to the downbeat. So this song not only has different melodic shapes, so pay attention to the shapes, but also pay attention to where the melodic phrases are starting, because you'll hear that there's a lot of contrast built in this song through the tools that we talked about as well. So this is levitating. Adam, I'm glad that we can't see you dancing too. So Susan says makes a great connection between the lyrics and the rhythmic placement for that song. Emily also says she likes the contrast between the descending seconds in the verse and the octave jump and the yeah, yeah, yeahs. Karen says great consistent use of rhythm and rhyme scheme. Love the octave jump for sure. Roz says lots of repetition and emphasis in some of the words. Veronica said the intro is flat, the verse is falling, the chorus stepwise, good combination of those. Absolutely, Veronica. So that's, if you listen to, like, the song is called Levitating, and in the verses, it starts by kind of like going down. There's a couple lines that go down, but then it rises back up and then it goes back down, which is kind of like when you're levitating, you're floating, right? So that melody is actually doing that. And that's what is setting up that prosody. And it kind of does, it does one of the things that is common in a lot of songs is the AABA in the verse, where two lines fall, one line rises, and then the last line falls again. So it's AABA. Stu says one section starts on, one off, one on, for the to the downbeat. Also, if you listen to the chorus part, or what's kind of the I got you, moonlight, da 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 da, that's all one note. And the verses were all over the place and moving all around. So when it gets, that's that contrast that's built by changing that. And when she says the title, the levitating, that's where she jumps up and it falls back down. So there is prosody as well. So there's all kinds of cool things that are happening melodically in this song. And it's just a great, the production is great. Everything works really well, but I think it's a good example for you to listen to as well, to get a sense of melody. So Dua Lipa, Levitating. The next song that we'll listen to is kind of a country pop song, a new one that Carrie Underwood released called Denim and Rhinestones. And the first time I heard this song, like, I'm just a sucker for a good melody. And this song captures, it's a Nashville song. So not only does it capture good lyrics, but it has great melody, great production. What I love about Nashville and what I love about country writers is they're so good at the lyric side too. And when you combine some of the pop melodies with the great lyrics, it just songs that I love. So this is one that I listen to this song a lot, but this is Denim and Rhinestones, and see what you hear within the melody. And we'll talk about this one as well. I think what I heard is in the verses, you had Rasa's repetition, definitely repetition. What I heard was the rhythms in the verse. Stu didn't like it. Sounded factory built. Kind of, well, Carrie Underwood's kind of at that level. It kind of is. But the song itself, I think, is good. The rhythm of the verses is more rhythmic and sort of more of a like shorter notes. And then when you get to the chorus, it made the title stand out by drawing out the longer notes. So I think it's a good example of contrast, not only in the note length, but also in the pitch range as well. So it was building from a lower sound to like a higher sound as well. So definitely some contrast in there. The tones are usually playing in the high notes, keeping the high tension during the whole song. Absolutely. So the next song we're going to listen to is Taking It Back, to some Def Leppard. So I know that there's some rock fans and some 80s music fans in here, but this song, I was listening to an 80s channel, and this song Photograph stood out to me because I was like, oh, I have to use this in the melody workshop, because there's so many different things happening melodically that I never noticed in this song before. And I think, you know, you know, sometimes rock and pop get a bad rap for, you know, not being very, you know, sophisticated or, you know, something, but there's really good rock and there's really good pop music that has really great craft under it. And I think this is a song that has really great craft. So let's take a listen to Photograph. That was Def Leppard. You're listening to Hot 104. That song, there's like a ton of things going on. There's like a lot of different, as Stu says, there's patterns, there's shapes, there's note lengths, rhythms. All together, it keeps you interested. And it's really when you start listening to it, it's really a brilliant song. And the prosody with some of the words that they hold out a little bit longer, like there's a line that says far from me, and the word far is sung a little bit longer than the other words. So it just stood out to me. What are some other observations that you all had for this one? Everybody's shy today. Adam said he wants to bring back guitar solos, so that's his mission now. Whoops. So that's all I have for what I had prepared, but is this helpful from a melody standpoint? Is this something that helps you as you think about your own writing, or what sort of questions or comments do you have in regards to what we talked about, or really anything within songwriting as well? So we'll kind of open the floor to you guys. Ra.
Hi, Shed. First of all, thank you so much for putting this together. I mean, it's so expensive for artists sometimes to invest in workshops and to have the chance to have to learn with someone who's knowledgeable and teaches in such a fun way. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, my question is okay, the challenge I have when it comes to my songwriting is that while I'm very grateful that I can be inspired and come up with things, I have a hard time with the technical aspect of it, because it's to me, when it comes, it's like I usually write at a moment that I'm going through something, and then I just want to channel that, and then sometimes I don't feel not the feel, I mean the time to actually work through every piece that comes in, and I feel like if I have to adapt to some of the rules that you, not rules, some of the techniques that you put on, I end up modifying a lot of the original piece that comes, So what would you have, I mean, what are your thoughts on inspiration and perspiration? And
So
way to go with it.
Yeah, so great question. So her question is, what's the relationship between inspiration and perspiration? And what she means by that is, a lot of times we'll get a nugget of a song or part of a song that comes to us in a blast of inspiration where we're like, oh, I'm going to write that as a song. And then you get to a point where you're like, well, now where do I go? What do I do next? And I think for me, when I have that happen, you kind of have to take an inventory of what you have and then determine what can I do that builds on it, but yet is something different, right? And if it's a lyrical idea, you have to pay attention to what part of the story are you telling already and what else could you say. But when you're talking about music and melody and things like that, I think that's where you start experimenting with the different melodic shapes. Look at the shape of what you have already and then try to come up with something that's different or contrast to that. And we have I'll be doing a lot of workshops talking about writing verses, writing choruses, writing bridges, all of the different song parts. So using some of that knowledge can help you know how to develop stories and how to develop a song as well. So it's a combination of looking at where you're at and where do you still need to go, but it's also what tools are available to you, not only from a melody standpoint, but also lyrics and chords too. So there's a lot that we can't fit into one workshop. So hopefully you can make it to, some of the other workshops for sure.
Cool.
And
Thank
Adam, you had your hand raised too.
Hey, Chad, thanks again for doing this. As always, it's not even an hour and a half, and this is pretty dense with information. Great overview and details. Just building off of what you were saying, about you know, taking ideas and building off of them, pun intended. I feel like with every decision you make in your melodies, then, you know, every door that's closed can inform the next door that's open, you know. And I don't know how many of you have ever written any songs based on one chord, but if you ever, this from personal experience, if you ever want the most incredible exercise in contrast or trying to practice your melodic contrast, write a song on one chord and study the songs that are just one chord. And you'd be surprised how many famous songs are just one chord. Get Up, Stand Up, for example. That's actually one of the best examples of one chord songs, in that there are two distinct bass riffs in that song that also drive it, but it is based on one chord harmonically. So there has to be melodic variation, but that really is the name of the game. I feel like if you almost, I don't want to take away from a lot of the intentional stuff that we talked about here, especially with the Scarlet Keys thing, she's great. But if you almost to an extreme go out of your way to contrast melodies, you write a verse, then you write a chorus in the most radically different way than the verse, it's still a great exercise, even if it doesn't even fit a lyric or anything. Just think, like, I know, like, we were just listening to Photograph and I put in the chat, oh, there's that syncopated pre-chorus. That pre-chorus is like, la, 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 out of nowhere, you know? So it's just like a completely different thing that draws attention to itself. And it's like each part frames the other. Basically, I feel like that's in all great songwriting. Every part frames the next.
Well, I had on the YouTube channel, I had somebody ask if we could do like a workshop on how to make verses match choruses. And actually, I think, Adam, your advice is, like, your verses kind of shouldn't match your chorus, right? It should contrast enough, because I think just the fact that you're staying in a key can make it sound like it's together. You know what I mean? It sounds like it's a consistent thing. Now, if you were changing keys completely, changing everything, that might sound a little wonky to our ears that are trained in more, I would say, conservative type songs, but and not conservatives in a political way, but it would
Kid
be
Rock songs.
Yeah, no. But you know what I mean? Because you could go totally off the wall weird contrast, but you would lose your listener with that too, right? Because we listen to songs that have some sort of thing that stays consistent within them. So if you do have a song with one chord, that chord is what's keeping the consistency. And what Adam's talking about is, if you only have one chord, you can't rely on harmonic changes to carry the song. And I think a lot of songwriters rely a lot on the chords to carry their song because their melody doesn't change that much. So it's kind of flipping it on its head to say, you have to write an interesting song, but you don't get to rely on your chords like you normally do. So it's definitely a good exercise too. And the other thing is try to write a song using only one note in the melody and make that interesting. So that's
need a lot of chords.
Not necessarily. That's where rhythm becomes more important than your pitch, right? That's where, you know, that syncopation, and, you know, look at rap, right? Rap is melodic in its delivery of lyric, right? So you can create contrast within the way that you are flowing with your rhymes. You can create contrast with the way that your rhythms are coming out, the length of the lines, how many lines you have. All of those things can create contrast. So you don't actually need a lot of pitch contrast, although that is another tool that can be used for sure. So thanks, Adam. Susie.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
We're good.
Thank you very much for this workshop. So I come from France, Paris, and musical culture there is highly text-centered. It means that we base most songwriters or rely on poetry. So lyrics is very important, sometimes more important than the melody and so on. Doesn't mean that they are not great songwriters. Who cares about the melody? But it's a pretty different culture compared to the American one and English speaking one. So, and also I'm a jazz singer, so I sing also English. So I try to reconcile these two contrastive cultures, and your workshop helped me a lot about that. So I have one question. About this link between the melody and the lyrics, do you think that it's better to start writing the lyrics and then think about the melody, or on the contrary, start with the melody and then write the lyrics, or it doesn't matter? It can be both of them. And
I think that you should practice both ways, to be honest, because I think songs come in different ways, right? I think as soon as possible, you need to marry the two, though, because that will dictate how you build the rest of the song.
yeah.
So I don't necessarily think it's good to write a full lyric and then try to fit the whole thing to melody. I think you have to massage it more throughout the process, but sometimes a whole lyric just, comes out, right? Like you can just write a full song with no effort at all lyrically. And then you have to be prepared to sit down and make it melodically work. And I think then in that situation, you have to be open to sort of, killing your darling, like be open to changing those lyrics to make it work melodically. I think if you don't, you come up with kind of wandering melodic songs that don't really have a lot of repetition. They don't really have motifs we can hang on to. So should you write one way or the other? I think you should practice doing the one that you're worst at first, right? Because the things that you're good at, you already naturally can kind of do. So push yourself a little bit to try it the other way. But yeah, I write songs. Sometimes they're lyrics and story first. Sometimes I write a complete song where the entire song melody is done, and then I go back and fit words to the melody. Like it goes all different ways for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great question though. Shelly in the chat says she usually hears a hook and then builds the chorus and then goes to the verse. Yeah, a lot of people, start with the chorus. I seem to be in this habit of starting with the verse and then building everything out. But, a lot of pros say start with the chorus first and then write the rest. So, Emily, you have your hand raised as well.
I wasn't sure how to digitally raise my hand, so
that's okay.
Just raise person. What if? Sorry, I'm just launching right into my question. But thank you for doing this, and it is helpful to kind of look more at the craft behind building melodies versus just whatever inspiration comes right away, because sometimes you want to craft it a little more and sometimes you want to work with it a little more. I guess my question is, I am coming from a classical background. So I got a degree in classical composition, and I was wondering what sort of advice or just tips would you have for someone who's trying to, I feel like listening to pop music and listening to various genres of music, I can hear enough of what's going on to know what to model my stuff after, but like, I guess what sort of advice would you have for someone who's coming from a classical background more towards the singer-songwriter genre of music? Is that I don't know if that's a confusing question or not.
No, so you're saying, just so I understand, you're saying that you have more of a classical background composing classical music, but now you're kind of looking to be more of singer-songwriter, writing more songs. I think there's a lot of, and I'm not classically trained and I'm not trained in composition, but a lot of the things that we talk about, I would say more in kind of a sanitized simple version, I think, is things that actually originate in classical music, right? Because I think a lot of what we listen to comes from that. So the idea of like a melodic motif and repetition and like all of those things come from that world, and if, when we talk about repetition, you can have exact repetition, you can have varied repetition, you can shorten the line and repeat just part of it. So you're segmenting, you can have the same rhythm, but the different notes, all of those different things. So that all comes from composition. I think for you, and this is just me theorizing, and if anybody else has tips, definitely put them in the chat or let her know too. But I think you learn by modeling someone else to begin with, right? Like you learn through imitation, so you kind of get the feel. So I think if you have songs, like maybe find 10 songs that you like in the genre that you want to write in, and listen to them nonstop and analyze them from your compositional mind, because your mind may understand it in a different way. You know what I mean? So just kind of study what's going on and listen to how there's tendencies and things in there. And then Shelley has good advice in the chat too. You could also co-write with someone that's already in that space, because you would learn a lot from them too. And I think YouTube, finding songwriters that are online that are kind of sharing what they do, I think is a good way to learn as well. Hopefully that answers your question. I mean, that's writing in a new style. I actually did there is a YouTube video that I did. There's 8 tips on how to write in a genre that you're not familiar with on the YouTube channel at homesongwriting.com. So that might help too.
Thank you. I had muted myself, but thank you. That helps.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions or thoughts today? If not, we can wrap up, and I appreciate you all spending part of your Saturday with us. And again, the next workshop is coming up on Saturday, August 27th. We're going to talk about chords and modes. And Emily, probably in composition, you probably know all about some of that stuff, but we're going to look at it probably from a more simple way that you can think about from a songwriter perspective. And yeah, just RSVP on Meetup, and Emily has in the chat too, if anybody wants to set up a co-write. Definitely there's the discussion board on Meetup that you guys can use, and I think you can message each other there as well. So thank you all for joining. This is one of the funner things I get to do during the week, so I appreciate spending some time with you, and hopefully it's helpful, and we'll all see you soon.
Thank you, Chad. It was great.
All right, have a great day.